When confronting a boss, its size can say a lot about its threat level. After all, dragons, giants, serpents, golems, et al. Are some of the toughest threats we've come across in gaming culture, and they're usually big. Not all large bosses can be as threatening though. Let's take a look at 15 ridiculously easy giants that don't really deserve their boss moniker. Twin Mold, The Legend of Zelda: Majora's Mask. Imposing enough initially, Twin Mold in The Legend of Zelda: Majora's Mask on the Nintendo 64 isn't really all that terrifying when Link himself turns into a giant. Hilariously enough, Twin Mold doesn't even attack, and damaging its weak points is all that's required for the fight. Majora's Mask 3D does up the danger by having Twin Mold actually attack Link, and this becomes a proper boss fight as a result. Dark Beast Ganon, The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. Running through 4 forms of Ganon and finally beating Calamity Ganon itself, it's almost naive to think that would be it for Breath of the Wild's final battle. Unfortunately, it kind of is. Dark Beast Ganon is the final boss, but functions more like an epilogue boss, simply there for the sake of cinematic tension. Link acquires the Bow of Light, fires at Ganon's weak points, and then finally at his core for the win. Kind of underwhelming since it's so straightforward. Yorm the Giant, Dark Souls 3. From the opening cutscene itself, Yorm establishes his presence. In the boss fight itself, make no mistake, Yorm can be pretty tough. That is until the weapon Storm Ruler is acquired from the very beginning. Charge it up, dodge an attack, and hit Yorm for massive damage. There's perhaps one dangerous lunging attack to worry about, but a few charged hits and Yorm is effectively finished. Perfect Chaos, Sonic Adventure. Sonic Adventure is one of those Sonic games that didn't age very well, especially from a 3D platforming perspective. That being said, it was still pretty fun, culminating in an epic battle with Perfect Chaos. The problem is that Perfect Chaos is not really much of a boss. As Super Sonic, running at it and avoiding obstacles is all that's needed. Some tornadoes and a crazy beam have to be dodged, but that's it. The real challenge, that too barely so, is ensuring Sonic has enough rings to keep his super form active. Human Reaper, Mass Effect 2. Shoot the glowing weak points, avoid its attacks, especially when they target breakable parts of the ground, mission over-ish. No, this isn't a more complex version of a Lost Planet boss, this is a boss in Mass Effect 2. It's also the final boss in Mass Effect 2. The Ket Archon is disappointing, but this is only slightly better, especially when it's a human Reaper. Diablo, Diablo 3. The Big Bad, Diablo, is a pretty tame encounter. When playing the game on hard or expert and leveling up accordingly, finding decent loot along the way, Diablo could be moderately imposing. Go in seriously though, and he's toast. For that matter, start the game with a Necromancer and Diablo becomes an even bigger joke. Remember the Diablo 2 days when he was a nightmare to face on the higher difficulties? This is sadly not that. The Last Giant, Dark Souls 2. There are many things that Souls fans find underwhelming about Dark Souls 2. The Last Giant isn't quite one of them, but he's still not all that tough to beat. His attacks are easy to read and dodge, even the Giant Stomp if you're aware of its impact range, and he moves at a slow pace. The Last Giant's calling card is ripping off his left arm and using it as a club, but deal enough damage and it will be separated anyway, preventing him from using it as a weapon. Maybe the Last Giant is a warning about Yorm's difficulty in Dark Souls 3? Malice, Shadow of the Colossus. In a world of highly agile colossi, powerfully imposing colossi, and some mix in between, Malice is an anomaly. It causes tons of damage thanks to its projectile attacks, but otherwise can't move. Thus Wander's true challenge is getting to Malice, navigating through obstacles while avoiding projectiles, and then platforming to his weak points. Its attempts to shake Wander off can be prevented by shooting its shoulder fur, rendering it stationary for a couple of seconds. Past that, Malice is kind of a pushover compared to some of the tougher colossi. Lambent Brumak, Gears of War 2. A Lambent Brumak of all things. How does one contend with a Lambent Brumak? In Gears of War 2, a Hammer of Dawn is the most efficient method. Let's make this even easier. The player doesn't even have to move, and they must use only the Hammer of Dawn. Simply aim and fire until it's dead. Hive Mind, Dead Space. Dead Space's unique twist and overarching narrative makes it one of the finest action games of all time. That being said, even with the incredible horror that the Hive Mind presents, it's not really all that challenging. Its attacks don't do a ton of damage, and the only real terror is Isaac potentially being eaten. That's prevented by just shooting the mind's weak points, and before you know it, Isaac is sailing into the proverbial sunset with his delusions. Zorah Magdaros, Monster Hunter World. Zorah Magdaros, the Great Elder Dragon, the one around whom much of the game's low-ranked plot revolves, is pretty easy. The actual hunt is more of a cinematic event. Your main task is destroying magma cores on Zora's body. Nergigante will swoop in at one point, but can be safely ignored. Like, completely. Sure, there's plenty of cannons to fire and using the Dragonator in this second encounter, but for all intents and purposes, this dragon is just easy, especially after the terror that was Diablos. Chaos, Final Fantasy I. In the NES version of Final Fantasy I, it was possible to defeat Chaos, the so-called toughest enemy in the game, with one blow. This was due to the Master's leveling increasing his attack speed and damage, further aided by casting fast on him. One attack would then yield an 8-hit combo, thus killing Chaos in one turn. If all 2000 HP isn't drained, he's still incredibly weak afterwards. This was later changed in the Dawn of Souls version, but for a time, Chaos was an embarrassingly easy giant. Seymour Omnis, Final Fantasy X. Seymour Flux is probably one of the most frustrating bosses to fight. However, Seymour Omnis is downright laughable. Not only can he not dispel summons, thus allowing Anima to be summoned, but it's possible to choose his elemental weakness. This allows you to deal increased damage constantly and make the battle fairly easy. Tirnoch, Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning. The final boss. Tirnoch should be the toughest fight in Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning. Unfortunately, she's not. The fight is essentially about getting her health low, killing her shades, and restoring your fate points to enter Reckoning mode. Then, when she's weak enough, just use a finisher and that's it. Want to make it even easier? Bring some fate potions along for extra fun. Andross, Star Fox 64. As you might have guessed by now, Andross in Star Fox 64 isn't all that tough of a boss. You either face him in a tight corridor, which requires firing as fast as possible to kill him, or in all range mode, as you fly about freely. Don't worry though, shooting his eyes out on the latter route makes him pretty much useless, and dodging his attacks are hilariously easy. That'll be it for this video. If you like what we're doing, please go ahead and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.